He is charged with one count, Penal Code Section 187. It is murder. There is a special circumstance that the defendant was engaged in the commission or attempted commission of the crime of rape in violation of Penal Code Section 261, sodomy in violation of Penal Code Section 286, or rape by an instrument in violation of Penal Code Section 289 within the meaning of Penal Code Section 190.2 subdivision A17. That is charged as a special circumstance in connection with this case. Arraignment took place on the 19th of July for the amended complaint. Defendant's true name appears on the amended complaint. He entered a plea of not guilty and denied the allegation. Mr. Doyle, you may call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you solemnly swear that the evidence shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, I do. Thank you. Please be seated at the witness stand.
Will you please state your first and last name and spell each of them for the record?
Beth Ann Shaver, Bethann, it's all one word, Schaver.
By whom are you employed?
San Diego County.
In what capacity?
I'm a deputy medical examiner.
And what kind of education and training did you have to prepare you to be a deputy medical examiner?
I earned my Bachelor of Science degree from Long Island University's CW Post Campus, earned my medical doctorate from the State University of New York at Buffalo School of Medicine. I then completed a 4-year anatomic pathology residency program at Harbor UCLA Medical Center, then completed a 1-year surgical pathology fellowship at UCLA Medical Center in Westwood, California, then completed a 1-year forensic pathology fellowship at the Office of Chief Medical Examiner of New York City. I then worked as a deputy medical examiner for the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office for approximately 8 months before taking my position in San Diego. I've been in San Diego for almost 14 and a half years, and I am board certified in anatomic and forensic pathology and licensed to practice medicine in the state of California.
And as part of your job as a deputy medical examiner, do you commonly perform autopsies in cases that you're assigned?
Yes.
Were you called out to a location on April 6th of this year at 646 A Street?
Yes.
Who did you arrive there with?
One of the San Diego County Medical Examiner investigators and one of the forensic pathology fellows.
And who was the forensic pathology fellow?
Dr. Kimmy Virak.
And was it your job to supervise her in her training?
Yes.
When you got to the location at 646 A Street, what did you see?
The law enforcement officers at the scene directed us to a parking lot next to a building, and there was a black suitcase on the ground.
I'm going to show you what I'm now marking as people's 1 and 2. Do you recognize what's depicted in people's 1?
Yes.
What is that?
That's the scene that we were called to on that day.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of the scene in the back of 646 A Street on April 6th of this year?
Yes.
I'm going to now show you what's been marked People's 2. Do you recognize what's depicted there?
Yes.
What is that?
That's the suitcase that I examined at the scene.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of the suitcase that you examined?
Yes.
When you saw that suitcase at the scene, did you make any decisions about how you wanted to handle the suitcase and its contents?
Yes.
What did you decide?
Because of media presence, to preserve trace evidence and for security, we elected to remove the suitcase from the scene and do our initial exam in the security of the medical examiner's office.
And was the suitcase transported as is from that site to the medical examiner's office?
No.
What was done?
It was wrapped in white sheets to preserve evidence, placed in a white body pouch, and sealed with a red tag.
And is that standard procedure in that kind of circumstance?
Yes.
After it was brought to the medical examiner's office, were you present when it was unsealed?
Yes.
Who was there with you?
Members of law enforcement, Dr. Viriak, and a forensic autopsy specialist.
And do you recall when it was sealed? Or unsealed, rather?
I'd have to refer to my report.
Do you have that with you?
Yes, I do.
Would that help to refresh your recollection?
Yes, it would.
If you could do that and look up when your recollection is refreshed. Is your recollection refreshed?
Yes, it is.
When was that unsealed?
17-20 hours.
And did you open the suitcase to see its contents at that time?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to show you what I'm now having marked as People's 3. Do you recognize what's depicted in People's 3?
Yes.
What is that?
That is how I first saw the decedent inside the suitcase when the suitcase was first opened.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of her status at that time?
Yes.
Looking at People's 3, your initial external examination of the body that's depicted, is there anything significant that you see?
One of the first things you notice is the distribution of the lividity, or the pooling of the blood after death. And you can see prominent lividity pooled along her thighs and buttocks, with sparing along the bottom of the buttocks, and the rest of the lividity was noted after she was removed. There weren't any obvious injuries when the suitcase was first opened.
And is what you described, that lividity, is that something that we can see looking at People's 3?
Yes.
Is there some kind of discoloration that's depicted there?
Yes, it's the purple-red discoloration that you see along her buttocks and her thigh.
Showing you what I'm now marking as People's 4. What's depicted in that photograph?
That is a photograph of the decedent after she was removed from the suitcase and laid on a table.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of how she looked at that time?
Yes, it is.
With respect to the lividity that you previously described, is that something that we can see in People's 4?
Yes, there is.
And where would that be depicted?
You can see the darkest lividity centered around her hips and thighs, and there's well-demarcated diamond-shaped blanching or absence of lividity along her inguinal areas, consistent with her tight fetal position noted in the suitcase.
Is there, understanding that there are some variations, is there a general timeline as to when lividity would set in?
Generally, lividity begins to form after a person dies. After a certain amount of time, it becomes what we call fixed, meaning that if you put pressure on that lividity, you can't displace it out of the tissue. Once it becomes fixed, it will stay, and then once the body starts to decompose, then you can't see it any further.
And when would lividity become fixed, generally?
Generally around 8 to 12 hours, but there's many variables that can affect that. Any increase in temperature can speed the process up. Any cooling will slow it down.
Based on the lividity that you've seen in People's 3 and 5, do you have an opinion as to the victim's positioning within the suitcase during the time that lividity set in and was fixed?
Yes.
What is your opinion in that regard?
She was placed in that fetal position in the suitcase before lividity had a chance to become fixed. Lividity pooled in around her thighs and buttocks in that tight fetal position. With the suitcase upright, her buttocks was in the bottom of the suitcase, her head was toward the top at the handle, and she remained in that position until lividity became fixed.
After removing the body from the suitcase and laying it out as depicted in People's 4, did you and Dr. Verlack conduct any kind of external examination?
A brief external examination was done that evening, and then the autopsy was performed the following day.
During the external examination, what injuries, if any, did you note?
She had congestion or plethora of her face with petechial hemorrhages on the skin of her face and neck and in the lining, the conjunctiva around her eyes. She had some scattered abrasions or scrapes and bruises on her body, and there was one small mark abrasion on her neck.
Did you notice any injuries to her hands?
Yes, she had some abrasions on her right hand and a contusion on her left chest, shoulder area.
During the external examination, did you examine the inside of her mouth?
Yes.
What did you observe in that regard?
She had abrasions and contusions on her lips and the lining inside her mouth.
How about her eyes?
She had petechial hemorrhages along the conjunctiva in her eyes.
And did you notice any injuries? Did you conduct an external or an internal examination?
Yes, the following day during the autopsy.
And during that examination, what injuries of significance did you note?
In the internal examination, she had hemorrhages or bleeding, bruising in the muscles in the front of her neck. She had a fracture of the hyoid bone, the horseshoe-shaped bone that sits above the larynx in the front of the neck. She had a bruise in her tongue, and she had superficial lacerations around her anus and rectum.
Did you actually section out the bowel?
Yes.
And what did you observe when you did that?
The genitalia and rectum were removed in block, and there were some small hemorrhages in the mucosa of the rectum, in addition to the superficial lacerations that were noted on the external exam of the anus.
Now, based on your observations during both the external and internal examination of the woman depicted in 3 and 4, as well as your training experience, do you have an opinion as to the cause of her death?
Yes.
And what is that opinion?
Strangulation.
And what do you base that on?
The constellation of facial and conjunctival petechial hemorrhages, along with hemorrhages in the muscle and the neck and the fracture of the hyoid bone, those are all hallmarks of the blunt force that was applied to her neck, that blunt force sufficient enough to cause strangulation and death. She had no natural disease to account for her death. She had no drugs or alcohol in her system to account for her death, and the body had been dumped in a suitcase in a method of disposal.
Did you observe any injuries consistent with strangulation by ligature?
No.
In your opinion, was this a manual strangulation?
Yes.
About how long would a manual strangulation take to occur?
Matter of minutes.
Is that something that can be done in a few seconds?
A victim may be rendered unconscious in a matter of seconds, but it would take several minutes for brain damage and death to occur.
Would that be several intermittent intervals or sustained strangulation?
If there's sustained continuous pressure, then death would be in a matter of minutes. But if this were an assault that took place over various times with repeated episodes of pressure, it could take longer.
Now, did you remove swabs from the victim's body?
A sexual assault kit was performed.
And when a sexual assault kit is performed, are there certain areas of the body that are swabbed?
Yes.
And were they swabbed in this case?
Yes, they were.
Where were the swabs taken from?
Oral swabs, breast swabs, external genitalia swabs, external anal swabs, vaginal vault swabs, cervical os swabs, and rectal swabs were taken.
And what was done with those swabs after they were taken?
They were turned over to law enforcement personnel right after they were taken during the autopsy.
And those were the homicide detectives that attended the autopsy with you?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness.
Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
start by talking about the cause of death. So no injury was in itself significant to cause death.
Well, I wouldn't expect the individual small abrasions and contusions on her skin, or the individual hemorrhages in her neck, or fracture of a hyoid bone by themselves to be lethal. But is what they represent. They are evidence of force that was applied to the neck, which is lethal.
And in this case, you waited for the tox results to come back, the victim's toxicology report, in deciding your cause of death, or before you made an official cause of death?
No, that's not true.
No, so the tox results didn't play into your determination at all?
Well, the toxicology results were negative, but even if she had had a positive toxicology result, that would mean that she may have had that drug in her system when she was strangled. The reason the cause and manner of death, if it were originally pended, would have been because law enforcement had sealed the case and they didn't want the information about the details of the case to be released initially while they were working on their investigation.
Okay, but knowing that she had no drugs, this was not something that you looked into like a drug overdose?
No, because generally people who die of a drug overdose are not stuffed in a suitcase and dumped in a garbage can. Most drug overdoses, if someone is trying to get rid of the body, it's placed on the side of the road, it's placed in some area where a person would find it, or dropped at the emergency room.
But it's not impossible for a body that was a drug overdose to be put in a suitcase?
It's not impossible, but it's not what we see generally.
Okay. You also mentioned in your report that there could have been suffocation based on the contusion that was inside of her mouth.
Yes, we can't exclude suffocation, but it may just represent a blunt force or a blow to the mouth.
Now, when we talk about blunt force injuries, in your profession, you use that term to mean any injury, not necessarily that someone was beaten with an object, correct?
Could you clarify your question?
You use the term blunt force injury, but that also can refer to a bruise that is caused by bumping into a table.
Well, blunt force injury is an injury created by a blunt force, either the body striking an object or the object striking the body.
When I talk about the injuries to her body, she didn't have any broken bones, correct?
Only the hyoid bone.
But no arms, legs, ribs, any other bones?
No.
And the hyoid bone had a slight fracture?
It had a fracture.
So it wasn't broken in half?
Where the two bones meet were separated. So I don't know. You have to clarify what you mean broken in half.
At the joint of the hyoid bone?
Yes.
There was a fracture. May I protract?
May.
Showing the witness what has been marked as Defense Exhibit A. Doctor, do you recognize that picture?
Well, I recognize it as a picture of gloves and a hyoid bone, but there's no identifying label as to whose hyoid bone it is in the photograph.
Does this hyoid bone have... So you weren't present when the pictures of the autopsy were done?
No, I was, but may not be a picture. There's no identifying label in this photograph from our office to say...
Okay. Is there a fracture in this hyoid bone?
Yes, there is.
And is that a slight fracture?
I don't know what you mean by slight fracture.
What would you classify it as in your...
It's a fracture.
Okay. Are there different degrees of fractures?
I don't know what you mean by degrees. A bone is broken or it's not broken. In this case, the hyoid bone is fractured. It's minimally displaced. I don't know if that's what you're interested in, is the degree of displacement.
Right, that is what I'm interested in. And what I mean by slight versus large fracture is a fracture can be throughout the whole bone or a portion of the bone.
Well, the hyoid bone is a very small bone.
Okay.
So I don't know what you mean by a large fracture in a small bone. It's fractured.
Okay. was not moved out of its place in the body. Meaning
No.
Not a displaced fracture.
It wasn't displaced.
And it wasn't broken all the way through, meaning that it resulted in two separate pieces of bone.
Well, the crack in the bone went all the way through. It's held together there by the connective tissue on the sides of the bone.
So it was broken into two separate pieces?
Yes, the fracture in the bone went all the way through the joint.
Outside of the knuckles on her right hand, there were no injuries that were actively bleeding, correct?
Well, she's dead. She can't actively bleed.
That were open wounds.
I don't know what you mean. What do you mean by an open wound?
I mean a wound that causes a cut in the skin and exposes the internal part that would be bleeding if someone was alive.
Well, a cut would be a sharp force injury, and she didn't have any sharp force injuries. She had multiple contusions and small abrasions scattered on her torso and extremities.
Okay, I'm more interested in blood. There was a brown fluid in the suitcase, correct?
A reddish-brown fluid staining the bottom of the suitcase.
And you referred to that in our previous conversation as a purge fluid.
I believe that it may represent purge fluid.
So this was not a case where an individual would be bleeding significantly. There was no injury, let me rephrase that. There were no injuries on her body that would indicate a loss of a lot of blood.
No.
There was some tan discoloration on her neck that you believe was likely from oxidation of her necklaces, correct?
Yes.
And not ligature marks?
No, they were not ligature marks.
Now the bruises that are on her body, you don't have the ability to date bruises to a specific time. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you don't know when the bruises got there.
They generally are all the same color, so they appear to be around the same time, but I can't tell you if they were received within several hours. Just she didn't have any bruises that looked like they were several days old.
Okay. And there was no injuries to her face. Let me qualify that. Meaning broken nose. She didn't have a broken nose, correct?
No.
No damage to her orbital bones, correct?
Her orbits were intact.
And the contusion that you're talking about inside of her mouth, you're not sure how that got there.
Well, I know it was caused by blunt force. What type of blunt force, I can't tell you. If she was hit with something, punched with a hand, or hit with an object, or had some object smashed down onto her face. All I can say is that it's blunt force trauma.
Now, the skin externally on her face was not split open.
No, it was not.
We talked a little bit about the petechia. And just so I have that right, petechia is caused when circulation is cut off, correct?
No.
Can you explain what petechia is?
Petechial hemorrhages are small pinpoint hemorrhages that occur when the pressure in the small blood vessels in the tissue exceeds what the tissue can hold, and the small vessels rupture, and you get small pinpoint hemorrhages.
Okay. So is it a fair statement that if circulation is cut off and then it is released, that it would cause petechia?
Well, anything that increases the pressure can cause them to rupture.
And isn't it true that petechia tends to occur above where circulation is stopped?
Well, in cases of strangulation, they tend to occur above the point of pressure.
And in this case, the victim had petechia on her back.
She had just a few small petechial hemorrhages on her back.
And you don't know exactly how that occurred.
No.
And you were unable to explain what would cause the petechia to show up on her back.
Well, the petechia on her back could have been from pressure inside those vessels if her body had been compressed in a position to cause them to rupture.
get petechia on their back from CPR compressions?
They could get bruises on their back from CPR. They could. Petechial hemorrhages are non-specific. They are seen in many types of cases. They can be seen with CPR. They can be seen in people who die of a heart attack. They're non-specific. It's just any event that causes the pressure in the vessels to exceed what they can hold and for the vessels to rupture and get the hemorrhages.
She did not have any outside abrasions, contusions, or lacerations on her external head.
No.
No skull fractures.
No, she only had some small hemorrhages on the subgaleal, the connective tissue covering the skull, beneath the scalp and on top of the bone.
And she didn't have any internal bleeding in her head or any other areas of her body.
Just the small hemorrhages in her rectum. There was no other internal bleeding.
Going back to the hyoid bone briefly, although it's rare, is it possible that someone can have a fractured hyoid bone that's not related to a strangulation?
It would have to, with the constellation of the hemorrhages that she has in the fracture, it would have to be some type of blunt force applied to the neck.
But it can happen.
Well, if someone were stomped on in the neck or punched very hard in the neck, they could get fractures of the hyoid bone or the laryngeal cartilages.
Now, talking about her vagina, there was no trauma found in her vagina at all.
We saw no injuries in her vagina.
And then as to her anus and her rectum, there was some external tearing, correct?
Yes.
And that could be consistent with hard wiping or consensual sex.
It could be consistent with consensual sexual activity. I don't know if I would see those types of injuries with hard wiping. I don't know what, you'd have to be more specific about what you mean hard wiping.
Well, I'm just going back to the discussion, the meeting that we had in your office about those injuries specifically, and that was something that came up. Do you remember that conversation?
I don't recall the specifics, but I don't think I would say that someone could get these injuries from hard wiping. She has lacerations at the anal rectal junction, and I don't think that could happen from hard wiping. Sometimes you see these types of injuries in children who have severe constipation and hard straining to pass hard stool, but we don't have that history in her.
But those tears could happen from something other than sex. Correct?
Some other trauma?
Something other than sex, yes.
Yes.
Could those tears be post-mortem?
With the hemorrhage that we saw, they appear most likely to be ante-mortem, not post-mortem.
In all of your findings, there was nothing that indicated that the victim was raped. Correct?
Could you define what you mean by raped?
Had unconsensual sex.
Well, the absence of injuries in the vagina doesn't exclude that someone had unconsensual sex, so I can't say whether she had unconsensual sex or not.
Okay, let me rephrase that because that wasn't exactly my question. My question was there was no trauma that would be interpreted in such a way that she suffered a violent rape.
She had injuries around her rectum that could indicate unconsensual penetration, but she had no injuries to her vagina. And I can't say whether it was consensual or non-consensual.
Okay, nothing further.
Redirect?
Good redirect, Trevor.
Thank you, Doctor. You're excused.
People call Philip Moore. please state your first and last name and spell each of them for the record?
More, P-H-I-L-L-I-P. More, M-O-O-R-E.
More, if you would please pull that microphone closer up to you and speak directly into the front of it, or I'll be able to hear you.
Okay.
The microphone doesn't work very well.
Sir, without giving me the apartment number, where do you live?
646 8th Street.
And what kind of residence is that?
It's a apartment hotel.
And how long have you lived there?
Since 2010.
And were you living there on April 5th and 6th of this year?
Yes, it was.
Who do you live there with?
I live by myself.
And do you have any responsibilities at the hotel?
I help out the manager with like basically everyday activities with like keeping the place clean and basically with stuff like that. Watching out, making sure doors are closed and just security and stuff like that.
Do you help out with trash?
Yes, I do.
Do they have communal trash cans at your residential hotel?
Yes, they are.
Where are they located?
In the back of the building.
Do you ever take those out to the curb?
Yes, we do.
Who helps you?
It's between 3 people. It's myself, the manager, and Edward Weddle. He's another one of the residents that help out.
When's trash day?
Wednesday.
And in preparation for trash day, when do you take the trash cans out to the curb?
Usually it's the day before on Tuesday, somewhere sometime between noon time and sometimes as late as maybe 8 o'clock. It depends.
Do you recall Tuesday, April 5th of this year, taking the trash cans out to the curb?
Yeah.
Did you take the trash cans out that night?
I do believe, yeah.
And do you remember what time you took them out?
It was probably around 6 or something like that.
In the afternoon?
Yeah, right. Well, no, the evening time around 6.
How many trash cans are back there?
About 8.
Now, did you take all the trash cans that were behind your residential hotel out to the curb on April 5th of this year?
Yeah.
You didn't leave any behind?
No. No.
Did you have a broken trash can back then?
We do have a broken trash can down there, but I guess it depends like whether if I'm thinking about it at the time, because once they're full, we'll go back there and we'll take them out.
Did you take the broken trash can out to the curb on April 5th?
That's the thing now. We took everything back there. It depends on whether I'm thinking about it at the time. I don't know.
Now, that night, around 2 o'clock in the morning, did you see anything going on in the lobby of your hotel? Or I'm sorry, at 2 o'clock in the morning the next day, that Wednesday, that Tuesday, did you see anything going on in the lobby of your hotel?
At 2 o'clock in the morning?
Yes, sir.
I don't know.
Do you recall speaking with a detective Barr about this case? Tracy Barr?
Yes.
Do you recall telling her that you saw some individuals in the hallway around 2 o'clock in the morning on April 5th?
No.
Do you ever recall?
I don't recall that.
Now, did you go and pick up the trash cans the next day on Wednesday?
No, I didn't.
Who did that?
Edward Waddle.
And about what time do the trucks usually come on Wednesday morning?
Usually hear them around 6 in the morning. 5,
Now,
6 o'clock in the morning.
At some point that morning, did you go back out to where the trash cans were?
Around 10-ish, I went back there. I had 2 trash cans from my room. I was getting ready to, I took them out to empty them in the back.
Your own personal trash cans
Yes.
and the communal trash cans
Right.
on Wednesday morning?
Wednesday.
And when you went to throw out your trash in the communal trash cans, what, if anything, did you see?
I went in the back, and there was one of the trash cans on its side, and I saw a suitcase maybe 2 feet next to it.
What did you do when you saw the trash can on its side and the suitcase next to it?
I went over. I thought it was, homeless going through it again. So I uprighted the trash can, and I went over to the bag, and I was getting ready to pick it up, and it had weight to it. So I pushed it. I originally noticed that there was some there was hair coming out of the sides. So I was getting ready I reached down and I picked it up, and there was weight to it. So I kind of dropped it again, and I looked at it, and I was wondering what was going on. So I went and I got my friend Edward Weddle to kind of take another look at it.
Now you said you had some trouble with homeless in the area?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
We have homeless that either come through at night to rummage through getting cans and plastic and stuff like that.
Is that what you thought might have happened when you saw the trash can outside and the suitcase behind your hotel?
We a lot of times have to, when we go, when we come back or we go back there, there's a lot of debris. When they go through, they'll sometimes just throw out trash looking for cans and stuff like that.
Did you open up the suitcase that morning?
No, I didn't.
What could you tell was coming out of it?
There was hair coming out of the zipper area. It was basically sparsely black hair.
Did that freak you out?
Yeah, yes.
What'd you do?
As I said, I just stared at it, and I wanted to be sure what I didn't know what I was looking at. So I went and got my friend to take another look at it to say, get another set of eyes on it, basically, and ask him.
And that friend's name was?
Edward Weddle.
I'm going to show you what I previously marked as Peoples 1 and 2. You can go ahead and take a look at Peoples 1. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph, Mr. Moore?
Yes, sir.
What do we see there?
The back of the building, and trash can area, and the bag.
And by the bag, you mean the suitcase?
Suitcase.
And when you say, is that your trash can area that you were previously testified to?
Yes.
And do we see your building in Peoples 1?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what I previously had marked as Peoples 2. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph, Mr. Moore?
Yes, sir.
Well, what's depicted in Peoples 2?
The bag and the trash cans in the background.
And is that how they looked on Wednesday morning when you went out and lifted up the suitcase?
Yes.
Now, after you got Mr. Weddle, what did the two of you decide to do?
We looked at it, and we kind of we basically walked around it, and when we were kind of looking, we saw the part of the suitcase that was open, and we noticed insects flying in and out of it, and that's when we kind of talked and said we should call the police.
And who called the police?
I called the police.
And after you called the police, did you stay in the area?
Yes, we did. We're told to stay basically where we were, and I guess within 10 minutes, the first police officers came.
The dispatcher told you to stay there for about 10 minutes?
Well, she just said, just don't move. Said we'll have officers come.
And did you notice anybody in or around the suitcase in that 10 minutes before the police arrived?
There was one person. There was like a 4-door. I don't know if it was a Honda or something like that. That was parked right next to it. It's full of vehicles. And we asked him, we asked him one guy, did you see, what was going on? Like, he says, like, no. So I think it was one of the workers that probably worked in one of the buildings or something like that.
Yeah. Now, do people who don't live in your hotel park in that parking lot around it?
It's an ACE parking lot.
And where do a lot of the people who park in that lot work?
Wherever, downtown.
Was there any kind of construction going on around your place in April of 2016?
There was a couple apartment buildings down the street from us that were going on.
Did a lot of construction workers park in that lot?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Just briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Moore, you live in the Chadwick,
Yes.
and you know Mr. Palmer, or you've seen Mr. Palmer before.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
You live in the room right below his room.
Right.
Now, on April 6th is when you called police after you noticed this trash can, correct?
Yeah.
Sometime around 10 a.m.
Yeah.
I want to back up into April 5th, the day before, but the early morning hours. So it would be Monday night into Tuesday morning. Okay? Were you home on that day?
Before that, yeah. I think so, yeah.
Now, you met with police officers in this case, or you gave a statement to police officers, correct?
Yeah.
And they showed you a picture of who they say was the young woman that was inside that suitcase, correct?
They didn't show a picture.
You don't remember being shown a picture at all?
No.
Did you ever see Mr. Palmer with a young woman?
Most of the time, I would see him coming in like late at night, like 12 o'clock or something like that. So, they would come in, we hear laughing, and I would look out, and it'd be them.
And it's, when you say them, are you referring to him and the same young woman that would frequent?
I think so. Yeah.
And can you describe her for us?
Not.
Well, did she have brown hair?
Brown hair, but I think it's black. I think it was black.
Black hair,
I think
dark
it was
hair.
black. Yeah, dark hair.
And was she black, white, Hispanic?
Took white.
About how old do you think she was?
Probably in her 20s, early 20s or something like that.
Was she short, tall,
She was short.
thin, heavy?
Thin.
Do you remember seeing that young woman come in to the Chadwick on that early morning between April 4th and April 5th?
I don't really recall.
Do you remember looking out and ever seeing her being loud and appearing intoxicated?
There were some times when they would come. I said they would come in at 12. Like it would be after 12, and you'd hear them. Like people would be talking loud, and they would come in, and she would be with them. Or there were times when I'd see them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to go specifically to the day you called police and the 2 days prior to you calling police. So that would be April 4th and April 5th. Did you notice anything unusual at the Chadwick vet in those days?
Not really, no.
So you
I don't
didn't
recall
hear
that.
any, You didn't hear any loud yelling or screaming.
No.
And you didn't hear the sounds of someone fighting.
No.
You didn't hear any loud banging.
No.
And in this residence, you live below Mr. Palmer, but you often go around the halls at night. Is that true?
I check like 12 o'clock to check like the doors and stuff like that. Yeah.
And you go up the stairs to where Mr. Palmer's room would be.
The second floor.
And on this night, you did not hear any fighting coming from his room.
No.
Furthermore, you have windows in your room that face like a courtyard, correct?
Yeah, backyard.
And Mr. Palmer's room right above yours also has windows in that same area facing that courtyard.
Okay.
Nothing further.
Mr. Doyle?
No redirection.
Thank you, sir. You're excused.
We'll call Eduardo Weddle.
The evidence you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated at the witness stand.
Sir, could you please state your first and last name and spell each of them for the record?
Eduardo, Eduardo, Weddle, Weddle.
Mr. Weddle, where do you live?
646 A Street.
And what kind of structure is that?
It's called an SRO, single room occupancy. It's a hotel residence, month-to-month residency.
And does it have some kind of name?
Chadwick,
How long have you lived there?
17 years.
And are you staying at home on April 5th and 6th of this year?
Yes.
Do you help out with any kind of the maintenance around the Chadwick?
For a long time, I've been the unofficial assistant to the manager. Now I am officially assistant manager.
And what kind of things do you do as assistant manager?
Currently, I'm just basically Bill, the manager, is a Greek person, doesn't understand a lot of things in English, so I translate a lot for him. I help him with various electronics things around the building and other duties like bringing in the trash, stuff like that.
And
Also mail runs,
when is trash day?
Wednesdays.
And was that the trash day back in April of this year?
Yes.
Do you know who took the trash out that day?
That's usually Bill that does that.
And do you know if he did that the night before trash day?
He always does it.
Who took the trash in the next morning?
That was me.
Now, about what time did the trash man get there?
I don't know what time he got there, but I arrived upon the empty trash cans at about 7:15 a.m.
And where were the empty trash cans situated when you got there?
Just off the curb in the street.
About how many trash cans are there?
Well, now I know we have 7, but it's usually about 6 or 7.
Did the police take some?
After the whole incident, they took the 1.
That one particular trash can, did you notice where that was on Wednesday morning?
That was as you go out the back door, it was closest to the back door, and they were all lined up from there.
Did you take that trash can in?
I took that one in last because I would go up to the end of the run, put the lids back up, pull them off.
About what time in the morning did you take the trash cans in?
About 7:15.
Now, when you took the last trash can in, did you notice anything unusual about it?
Yes, I was expecting it to be empty, but it was unusually heavy. And I noticed on the front of it there was a sticker from the waste department stating that the trash can was not serviceable,
Now,
and they couldn't pick it up.
In the past, did Phil ever take that trash can out?
I suppose he has. I don't know. I wouldn't know for sure. I know he helps out doing stuff like that.
Did you look in the trash can?
I looked in, saw that it was full, closed it, and put it off to the side where Bill could see it and then deal with it.
You didn't put it with the other trash cans?
Sort of. I lined up all the other trash cans behind the building. This one I lined up just inside the gate as you go into the back of the building.
I'll show you what's been previously marked as People's Exhibit 1. Can you tell me, Mr. Weddle, if you recognize what's in that photo?
Yeah, that would be the trash can that I left. That's where it was located.
And for the record, you're pointing at the trash can with the number 2 marker next to it?
Yes.
And is that where you placed that particular trash can?
Yes, it is.
On Wednesday morning?
Yes.
The other trash cans depicted on People's 1, is that where you placed those trash cans on Wednesday morning?
Yes.
And again, why did you place the trash can marked People's 2 off to the side where it's located?
So that when Bill came out to look around, he would notice that was the broken one that needed to go back. I had seen that particular one because over here where you can't see is where he would put the broken cans for replacement, and that's where it was the day before.
And for the record, you're pointing off to the right of People's?
Off to the right.
1. Is People's 1 a fair and accurate depiction of where you place each of those trash cans on Wednesday morning?
Yes.
Now, the suitcase marked People's 1, marked with the number 1 marker on People's 1. Did you notice that suitcase when you pulled the trash cans back in Wednesday morning?
I didn't pay much attention to what was in there. I just looked and saw that it was full, closed it, and didn't really scan the objects.
Was there a suitcase laying in the back behind the Chadwick when you pulled the trash cans in?
No.
That suitcase marked People's 1 wasn't there at that time?
No, it wasn't.
What did you do after you brought the trash cans?
I went back to my room and had a cup of coffee, ate breakfast, that kind of stuff.
When was the next time you went back out to the back of the Chadwick?
At around 11:15, my buddy Phil Moore, who also works there sometimes, knocked on my door and he said, "Come here with me, I want to show you something." He directed me toward where this suitcase marked 1 in People's 1 and said, "Go ahead and look at that and tell me what you think." And I looked at it, and at the back end it looked like somebody's toes. Then I went around the front and I saw a hair hanging out the front. And he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Looks like there's a body in there."
And what, if anything, did you do after you told Phil that it looked like there was a body inside the suitcase?
Better call the police.
And who called the police?
He did.
Did the police show up?
Very quickly, about maybe 10 or 12 minutes.
And what were you and Phil doing while you waited for the police to arrive?
We were just hanging around off and away, more towards the back door entrance. When the police got there, they pushed us off to the side and said to stay right here. And very quickly they started putting out the yellow police tape all around the perimeters.
And at that time, did you give a statement to police officers?
Not right away. I went back inside, and then a couple minutes later, Phil came back and said they want to talk to you too.
And,
They being the police.
and did you talk to them?
Yes, I did.
Now, are you acquainted with many of the residents who stay inside the Chadwick?
Not too many.
Did you know the resident of apartment 217 back in April of last year? Or this year, sorry?
217?
April 5th of 2016.
I didn't know who it was. I would see the defendant in passing. Hi, how you doing? That kind of thing. Nothing more than that.
And by the defendant, who are you referring to?
Joshua Palmer.
Do you see him seated here in court today?
Yes, right over there.
Could you point to him and
He's wearing the blue scrubs.
would the record reflect identification of the defendant?
Yes.
He was a resident of the Chadwick back in April of 2016?
Yeah, he lived in Unit 214.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Where is your room in relationship to room 214?
Okay, my room now is on a different floor. At the time, I was in 201, which is just around the corner, on the corner of the building,
On the second?
on the second floor.
So would that be the opposite corner
Of,
as 214?
yeah, pretty much.
And you were home on the evening of April 4th and April 5th?
I'm home every day.
You didn't hear any screaming or fighting?
No, where that room I was living in is pretty much isolated in such a way that I can hear lots of street noise, but anything outside my door I have a hard time hearing because it's just a distance away.
About how far do you think your front door to the room you were staying in April and the door to room 214 is?
Probably 25 feet.
But it's across the hallway?
It's on on opposite sides of the hallway, right?
Okay, nothing further.
Mr. Doyle?
Your redirection.
Thank you, sir. You're excused.
Thank you, sir.
People call Officer Thomas McGrath.
Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated as a witness.
Would you please state your first and last name and spell both of them for the record?
My name is Thomas McGrath. First name Thomas, Thomas. McGrath, McGrath.
By whom are you employed?
City of San Diego,
In what capacity?
Police Department.
And are you an officer with the police department?
I am.
Officer McGrath, were you working on patrol on April 6th of this year?
I was.
And where were you assigned on April 6th?
Patrol in central downtown San Diego.
And were you in a single car or did you have a partner that morning?
It was a single car.
And when was your shift? What hours?
Between 06 and 1600 hours. So 6 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Now, in the late morning of April 6th, were you dispatched out to any locations?
I was
Where were you dispatched to?
to 646 A Street.
Is that in downtown San Diego?
It is.
When you got there, what did you see?
Well, in route to the call, received information that there was a black suitcase, possibly with a human foot and hair coming out of the bag. Right on scene, another officer arrived with me, Officer Rhea, and we contacted the reporting party who was on the cell phone. Asked him if he called police. He nodded his head and said yes, and he took us to the location where he observed a suitcase.
Who was that individual?
Anthony Phillips.
What did he look like?
He was an African-American male, maybe in his 40s.
Did you see him out in the hallway today before he testified?
I did.
And what was he doing when you arrived?
I'm sorry. The name was Anthony Phillips?
Yes.
Okay. Could you pull the microphone a little bit closer to you, please, and speak into the front of that?
Yes, sir.
How did you identify this individual?
Well, the radio call just said the reporting party is Anthony Phillips. And when I arrived on scene, he was the only person on the phone. I asked him if he was on the phone with dispatch. And he said yes. And then he started walking over towards the scene.
Did you check his ID or FI in any way?
No, not at the time. Officer Rhea did.
You were just going off the name that dispatch gave you?
Yes.
But it's the gentleman you saw seated out in the hallway before you testified this morning?
Yes.
When you got to this individual, and he said he was the one who called dispatch, what did you do?
Well, I followed him to the scene. So we went northbound on 1300 7th Avenue, and we got to the northeast side of the building. And at that point, he pointed at a black suitcase that was in the middle of the parking lot.
You have what's been marked People's One in front of you. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
I do.
What is that?
It's the area, it seems the north parking lot of 646A.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of the way it looked when you got there on the morning of April 6th?
Yes.
Incidentally, do you know what time you got there on April 6th?
11:07 hours.
And when you, this individual pointed out the suitcase that's depicted in People's One, what, if anything, did you do?
Well, at that point, I put on my black gloves that we have, and then I activated my body-worn camera. I conducted a visual sweep of the area for anything that I would consider to be evidence or related to the suitcase. I didn't observe any, and I approached the suitcase. When I got closer, I could see what appeared to be human toes, and as I got closer, I could see a very dark, almost black hair coming out the top of the suitcase.
Did you open up the suitcase?
I did.
How did you open it up?
I approached a open side that was already unzipped. I opened it about 12, 14 inches just to confirm if it was a body. I saw a right leg and foot with the toes attached. I identified the body as Hispanic or white, female, early 20s. And at that point, I closed the suitcase.
And when I say, how did you open and close the suitcase? Did it have straps or a zipper? Or how were you able to open it up?
It was mostly unzipped, so I didn't have to manipulate anything. I just opened up an open flap at the bottom part, and I opened it up.
And you did that while wearing the gloves that you previously described?
Yes.
When you confirmed that it was a deceased female inside the suitcase, what did you do?
At that point, I closed the suitcase and informed my partner that we had a crime scene and that we had to lock down the scene with more officers. So we secured the entire west side of 1300 7th, and then we had another officer go to the south perimeter of the parking lot entrance and exit at the 600 block of A.
Did you radio for any kind of assistance?
I did, and notified my sergeant immediately that we had an active crime scene there, and he responded, and then we got another sergeant to maintain the outer perimeter as well.
And did you assist in any way in the investigation after the sergeant showed up?
Maintain a roster and count of all officers on scene, designated as a scribe, and collected related reports to the initial investigation.
Thank you, officer. No further questions.
Cross-examination? Thank you, officer. You're excused. We have 15 minutes.